Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In 3 different places in Cicero's On the Nature of the Gods, Book 2, we are going to find a consistent Stoic doctrine and indeed argument being put forward about what we could very broadly call the for the sake of, the causa being used to denote something is for something else, that the value of the one thing resides in what it provides to another thing. And the basic Stoic idea is that everything, like plants and animals and rocks and stuff like that, exists for the sake of a higher kind of being, rational beings. And the Stoics acknowledge 2 main sorts of rational beings. There is God, capital G, and the gods, lowercase g, and they are fully rational. So they're better than us, because there's also us human beings, the rational animals, who are not fully rational. As a matter of fact, we're often quite irrational, but we have a capacity for rationality that we ought to develop. And the only person who would be fully rational would be the legendary sage or wise person. The Stoics are kind of divided on whether such a person actually exists, maybe once every 500 years. We don't need to worry too much about that. Suffice it to say that there is a sort of hierarchy of being where plants are on a very low level, animals that are not us, not rational animals, but brute or bestial animals are a higher stage, and then there's us, and then there's the gods. And we're going to see this come up already in section 14, where Chrysippus is going to say, just as a shield case is made for the sake of a shield and a sheath for the sake of a sword, everything else, except for the world as a totality, was created for the sake of some other thing. So, for example, corn and fruits produced by the earth, who are they produced for? Now here, Chrysippus is apparently saying that they're produced for the sake of animals, and then animals are produced for the sake of human beings. And he gives examples: the horse for riding, the ox for plowing, the dog for hunting and keeping guard. What about us? Well, the human being has a purpose as well, namely contemplating and imitating, and those are the verbs that are actually used, contemplandum et imitandum, these activities of doing these things, the world as an intelligent, rational thing. So not imitating the world as something just brute and, there, but something that is presumed to be arranged in a harmonious way. So that's our purpose, and the other things exist for our sake. So that's the first discussion that he's going to have there. He's going to pick this up again in a much later section, namely 53, where we're going to read, somebody might ask, for whose sake, cuius causa, was this vast system, molitio, made or contrived? So we could ask, well, maybe things are made for the lower parts. So maybe plants, he says, Was it created for the sakes of trees and plants? These, without sensation, have their sustenance from nature. And then he says, well, this is absurd. No, this wasn't created for plants. It's nice that plants get to live here and flourish and prosper, but no, that's not the purpose of the world. What about animals? Okay, now that might be a little bit more reasonable. He says, well, it's no more likely that the gods took all this trouble for the sake of stupid, irrational creatures. And then he says, okay, well, what does that leave? For whose sake shall one pronounce the world to have been created? And he says, doubtless, the sake of those living beings which actually have the use of reason, ratione utuntur, who make use of reason. And who are these? The gods and human beings as rational beings. And these assuredly surpass all other things in excellence. Why? Because the most excellent thing is reason. So it's rationality that gives human beings and gods a kind of ontological and moral primacy over everything else. So those are two earlier discussions, and he's going to return to it in a more sustained way, running throughout the end of chapter 61, and then the totality of 62, 63, and 64. And this is going to outline a Stoic position, which we can, by the way, find in other texts. For example, certain places in Seneca where similar things are being said. So he says, it remains for me to show that all the things in this world which human beings employ, use, right, were created and provided for the sake of human beings. So, causa facta esse et parata, right? So causa is signifying that it's hominum causa, for the sake of human beings. Facta esse, were made. Et parata, were prepared or made ready for us human beings. So how is he going to do that? Well, he's going to start by saying, in the first place, the world itself was created for the sake of gods and human beings, and the things that it contains were provided and contrived for their enjoyment, their fructum. So it's not just using it, it's also enjoying those sorts of things. And we're going to see that there's multiple modes, let's say, of this use and enjoyment that human beings get out of these lower things within the world. Lower in the sense of lower types of being. So he says first, what was the point of the world? It's the common dwelling place of gods and men, or the city that belongs to both. And this is a very common Stoic conception, a city or community of human beings and gods. We see this in, Cicero's depiction of Stoics. We see this also used as a phrase in Seneca, in Epictetus, in other Stoic authors as well. So this is kind of a commonplace that we are all part of one big community as rational beings. Why? Because we have the use of reason, so we all have ratio, and we live by justice and law. So these are all interconnected with each other. And then he goes on and he talks about, things that we can witness within the world. The revolutions of the sun and moon and other heavenly bodies. Those things maintain the structure of the world, but there's also a secondary aspect to them that's an enjoyment, a fructu. We can watch them. We can take meaning or joy or, awe in these sorts of things. He says there's no sight of which it's more impossible to grow weary, none more beautiful, nor displaying a more surpassing wisdom and skill. By measuring the course of the stars, we'll know when the seasons will come around and their variations and changes that will occur. So these must have been created for the sake of human beings, right? Then he goes on and talks about agricultural products. Now, we saw that earlier. He's attributing to Chrysippus, who's, a very important Stoic philosopher, that plants exist for the sake of animals, to feed animals of various sorts. And here he's going to talk about agricultural products. So not everything that a plant produces, but the ones that involve some cultivation. So he says, here we go, the earth teeming with grain and vegetables of various kinds, does she appear to give birth to this produce for the sake of the wild beasts or for the sake of men? What about vines and olives, whose bounteous and delightful fruits do not concern the lower animals at all? Grapes, meaning the vines, right? And olives, which actually take some processing. In fact, the beasts of the field are entirely ignorant of the arts of sowing and cultivating and reaping and gathering the fruits of the earth in due season, storing them, and their products are enjoyed and tended by human beings, meaning we have usus, use, and cura, care for these. And he says, so if we want an analogy, just as lyres and flutes, musical instruments, were made for the sake of those who can use them, it must be agreed the things of which I've spoken, agricultural products, have been provided for those who make use of them. Even if some portion is filched or plundered by some of the lower animals, they weren't created for the lower animals, they're created for us. So human beings don't store up grain for the sake of mice and ants, but for their spouses and children and households. The animals share these fruits of the earth by stealth, whereas masters enjoy them openly and freely. So this stuff is for us. And then he has a concession that kind of goes back to this spectacle thing. He says, there could be that the bounteous plenty and variety of our orchard fruit and delightfulness, not only of its flavor, but also scent and appearance. These, clearly, it's for us as well. So human beings, they are there to appreciate and enjoy these things, and these things are there for them. What about the animals? The animals are there to be helpful for us, right? He says animals were created for the benefit of human beings. What other use have sheep except that their fleeces are dressed and woven into clothing for us? And they couldn't have been reared or sustained or produced anything of value without our care and tendance. What about the dog? With its trusty watchfulness, its fawning affection for its master and hatred of strangers, its incredible keenness of scent in following a trail, and its eagerness in hunting. These were created to serve the conveniences of human beings. What about oxen? The very shape of their backs make it clear they were not destined to carry burdens, but their necks were born for the yoke and their broad, powerful shoulders for drawing the plow, right? And then he goes on, it would be a long story to tell of the services rendered by mules and asses, which were undoubtedly created for the sake of human beings. So animals are there to be helpful for us, and we're the ones that really matter. They're there for our sake. Then there's the animals that we eat and enjoy eating. And he starts out talking first about one of the most intelligent of the domesticated animals, the pig, right? He actually says something interesting. As for the pig, it can only furnish food. Indeed, Chrysippus actually said that its soul was given to it to serve as salt and keep it from putrefaction. This animal was fitted for the food of man, so nature made it the most prolific of all of her offspring, right? Pigs are just there for us to eat. As some people have joked, they have this wonderful bacon, right? You all remember back when everybody wouldn't shut up about bacon. And then there's all sorts of other animals that we enjoy eating as well. He talks about fish and birds and other kinds of things, great beasts of the forest that we take by hunting, both for food and to exercise ourselves. There's others that we use to help us, like elephants, right? To use them for our employment And then he uses this as a segue into talking about medicine. So, elephants' tusks and other parts might be used for that. We could think of all sorts of other, traditional medicines that use various animal parts for medicine. And then plants are used in a lot of medicinal ways. And where is he going to ultimately go for this? He says all of these things were created for human use. Usum hominum, right? That's the point, and we're the ones who discover this. Now, the gods don't really need to use animals for food or beasts of burden or, dogs to guard them or anything like that, but presumably the gods could still participate in the spectacle of the universe and taking some aesthetic joy in that. So everything except for the totality of the world itself and the gods and the human beings are there for the sake of those two classes of rational beings, namely gods and humans.